What if the family you'd kill for planned to bury you alive under their lies? Riley Harper's world shattered when a dusty cassette from her dead grandmother's grave whispered her father's plot. A $500,000 fortune stained with her stolen dreams and a frame-up to lock her away. Shock, heartbreak, and a ticking heart unravel in this gut-wrenching betrayal. Will she survive the truth? Hit subscribe now and help us hit our first 1,000 supporters to uncover it all together. What would you do if the family you die for framed you for their crimes? Riley Harper thought she was their lifeline, until a dusty cassette from her dead grandmother exposed a $500,000 lie and her father's voice plotting to send her to prison. Picture this: a woman who clawed her way to success only to find the people she loved most had built a fortune on her broken dreams. Shocking secrets are about to unravel in this twisted tale of betrayal. Hit subscribe now and join us as we dig into the truth. Let's get started. Riley Harper leaned back in her worn leather chair, the glow of her laptop casting sharp shadows across her downtown Salt Lake City apartment. At 33, she'd built a life most people only dreamed of. A self-taught stock trader pulling in six figures through sleepless nights and a razor-sharp mind. The Wasatch Mountains loomed outside her window, their snow-capped peaks a silent witness to her grind. But tonight, those mountains felt accusing, like they knew something she didn't. Riley wasn't in her sleek city hideout. She was at the Bear Lake vacation home, a rustic cabin nestled by the water, the scent of pine and old wood thick in the air. This was the Harper family's sanctuary, a place of marshmallow roasts and Nora's warm laughter. Riley had kept it alive, pouring her heart and cash into it, but tonight, it was about to become a battlefield. She'd come up for a quiet weekend, a break from the endless ticker tapes and market buzz. The fireplace crackled, casting a flickering glow over the plaid sofa where her mother, Grace, used to knit. The coffee table was cluttered with fishing magazines and a half-empty mug of cocoa, hers. Riley stretched, her joints popping from hours hunched over trades, when her foot nudged something under the table. A small wooden box, edges worn smooth, initials NH carved into the lid. Nora Harper, her grandmother, the woman who taught her to cast a line and whispered, "You're tougher than they know, kid." Nora had passed 3 years ago, her heart giving out in this very house. Riley's throat tightened as she lifted the lid, expecting photos or old lures. Instead, she found a dusty cassette tape, unlabeled, tucked beside a faded Polaroid of her and Nora by the lake. Curiosity tugged at her. She rummaged through a drawer, found an old tape player, one of Nora's relics, and popped the cassette in. Static hissed, then a voice cut through, low and deliberate. Her father, David Harper. "If the trust fund leaks, Riley's the fall guy. She's got the skills to fake it. She's a traitor, right?" "Who'd question it?" A second voice, smooth and clipped. "A lawyer, maybe," replied. "We'll need documents, something airtight." The tape clicked off. Riley's hands shook, the player slipping from her grip. Her father, broad-shouldered, gruff David, who'd preached family first her whole life, was plotting to frame her. For what? Prison? Her mind raced, heart thudding hard against her ribs. Too hard. She pressed a hand to her chest, breathing shallow. Not now. She stood, pacing the creaky floorboards, when her eye caught something else, a corner of paper sticking out from under a magazine. She yanked it free, the bold print slamming into her like a freight train. Trust fund agreement. Sophie Harper. Established 2020. Initial deposit $350,000. Sophie, her 31-year-old sister, the golden child who needed a safety net while Riley bussed tables and coded trading bots to scrape through college. 5 years ago, David had shrugged when she'd begged for tuition help, saying, "We're stretched thin, Riley. You'll figure it out." And she had. While he'd been strashing $500,000 for Sophie, the numbers didn't lie, but they burned. Her hazel eyes darted back to the tape player, then the document. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a setup. Riley sank onto the sofa, the fire's warmth doing nothing for the ice in her veins. She'd paid $45,000 in property taxes for this house over 5 years, $9,000 just last month. She'd shelled out $1,800 for Sophie's shiny Jeep when her sister whined about needing freedom. She'd wired $120,000 for a new roof after a storm ripped the old one apart, and $9,000 for Grace's heart surgery 2 years back when insurance balked. All told, $175,000 of her blood, sweat, and tears had gone into this family, this house, the one David was now ready to pin on her if his scheme went south. And that cassette? It was Nora's last gift, a warning from beyond the grave. Her phone buzzed, David's name flashing like a siren. She ignored it, but a voicemail pinged seconds later. His voice growled through the speaker. "Riley, you up at Bear Lake? Good. We need to talk about the taxes, $9,000 due next week. Don't flake on us now." "Flake?" She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that echoed off the log walls. He didn't know she'd found the tape, the trust fund. His lies stacked like a house of cards. She clutched the cassette, her knuckles white. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. But then a sharper pain stabbed her chest, a familiar warning. Her disordered racing heartbeats she'd hidden since she was 20, when she'd collapsed mid-shift at a diner, pills rattling in her pocket. She'd kept it from them, terrified they'd see her as weak. Now it flared, fueled by rage and shock. She stumbled to her bag, fumbling for her meds, swallowing two, dry as the room spun. The tape, the trust fund, David's voice. It was too much. She had to act, but could she even survive this fight? Last time, Riley Harper uncovered a $500,000 trust fund for her sister Sophie and a chilling cassette of her father David plotting to frame her for it all. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Tonight, we're peeling back the layers of Riley's sacrifices and a secret she's buried deep that might just kill her. What would you do if the family you built your life around didn't just betray you, but left you fighting for every breath? Stick around, this is about to get intense. Riley Harper sat on the plaid sofa in the Bear Lake cabin, the cassette player silent now, but its echo ringing in her ears. The trust fund document lay crumpled in her fist, $350,000 staring back at her like a slap in the face. $500,000 now, if Owen's numbers were right. Her hazel eyes traced the flickering flames in the fireplace, but all she saw were the years she'd poured into this family. 5 years ago, David had stood in this very room, his broad shoulders slouched, telling her, "College isn't in the cards for us, Riley. We're broke." She'd believed him. Taken a second job, slinging coffee at 3 a.m., coded trading algorithms on a busted laptop, and clawed her way up. Meanwhile, he'd been stacking cash for Sophie, dance lessons, a private college, a cushy life Riley never got to taste. Her mind tallied the cost. $45,000 in property taxes over 5 years, wired straight from her account to keep Bear Lake from the bank's claws. $120,000 for a new roof after a brutal winter storm. David had called it a family emergency, while Sophie posted selfies in Park City. $1,800 for that cherry red Jeep Sophie needed for her freelance gigs, though Riley's old Toyota rattled on bald tires, and $9,000 for Grace's heart surgery 2 years back, when insurance denied the claim and David shrugged, "You're the strong one, Riley, figure it out." She had $175,000 total, scraped from sleepless nights and skipped meals, all while David preached tough love and Sophie smiled through it. The numbers burned hotter than the fire, but the real heat was in her chest, a racing thud she couldn't ignore. Riley pressed a hand to her sternum, her breath shallow. She'd hidden it for 13 years. Her disorder, a genetic glitch that sent her heart into overdrive. It hit her first at 20. Mid-shift at a diner when exhaustion and stress dropped her to the floor, coffee mugs shattering around her. The ER doc had handed her a bottle of beta blockers and a warning, "Slow down or this'll kill you." She hadn't slowed down. She'd sped up. For them, for this house. For Grace's frail smile and Sophie's carefree laugh. She'd sworn to Nora on her deathbed, "I'll keep this family together, even if it costs me everything." Now, that promise felt like a noose. Her fingers fumbled for the pill bottle in her jacket, but it slipped, rolling under the sofa. She cursed, dropping to her knees, the room tilting as her pulse spiked. The wood floor was cold against her palms as she fished for the bottle, memories crashing in. Nora's voice, raspy but firm. "You're tougher than they know, kid. But don't let them break you." Break her? They hadn't just broken her, they'd stolen her past and rigged her future. She'd traded shifts for Sophie's Jeep, starved herself for Grace's surgery, all while David siphoned $25,000 from her college savings. Her proud little nest egg, gone to bloat Sophie's trust fund. She snatched the bottle, popped 2 pills, and slumped against the sofa, waiting for the pounding to ease. It didn't, not fully. The betrayal was too fresh, the cassette too loud in her mind. Her phone buzzed again, David, relentless. She swiped it up, his voice crackling through. "Riley, you still at the lake? Good, taxes are due, $9,000. Don't let us down." "Let them down?" She laughed, sharp and jagged, the sound bouncing off the log walls. "Don't let us down?" She'd carried them for years, and he had the gall to guilt her while plotting to pin his crimes on her? She ended the call, her finger hovering over Owen Pierce's number. Her financial guy, a forensic accountant with a knack for digging up dirt. She hit dial. "Owen, it's Riley. I found something. $500,000 trust fund for Sophie, and David's setting me up to take the fall. I need you to trace every penny I've given them, and that $25,000 he stole. I want it back." Owen's calm voice steadied her. "Give me 48 hours. We'll get the truth." She hung up, staring at the cassette. David's words looped, "Riley's the fall guy. Frame her for what? Fraud? Embezzlement? She was a traitor." Her career thrived on trust. One whiff of scandal and her clients would bolt, her portfolio would tank, her life would crumble. And her heart? It thudded harder, a warning she couldn't shake. She'd hidden it to protect them, to be the rock they leaned on. Now that rock was cracking. She crawled back to the sofa, clutching Nora's Polaroid, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm trying, Grandma," she whispered. "But I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." The fire popped, casting jagged shadows across the room. Grace's knitting basket sat untouched by the hearth. Her mother, who'd watched Riley bleed for them, who'd said nothing when David lied. Did she know? Sophie's Jeep keys glinted on the counter. Her sister, who'd taken and taken, oblivious or complicit. And David, pacing somewhere in the city, spinning his web. Riley's chest tightened again, a dull ache spreading. She couldn't keep doing this, not alone, not like this. But walking away? That meant letting Bear Lake go, letting Nora's memory fade, letting them win. Last time, Riley Harper tallied up $175,000 she'd poured into her family, only to find her heart literally couldn't take the betrayal. That cassette of her father David plotting to frame her still haunts her, but the storm's just brewing. Tonight, we're diving into a $25,000 theft, a legal trap that could land Riley in jail, and a sister who might not be so innocent. What would you do if your own blood turned your life into a lie? Buckle up. This one's a roller coaster. Riley Harper sat at her kitchen table back in Salt Lake City, the Bear Lake cabin a fading memory in the rear view. The cassette from Nora sat beside her laptop, its threat humming like a live wire. She'd barely slept, the weight of David's voice. Riley's the fall guy. And her racing heart keeping her wired. Her pill bottle rattled as she tipped out another dose, the bitter taste grounding her. Owen Pierce's call was due any minute and she needed answers. The trust fund was bad enough, $500,000 for Sophie, built on years of lies, but the idea that David would pin it on her, that cut deeper than the numbers. Her laptop pinged, an email from an unknown sender. Check your history. You're in deeper than you think. Attached was a PDF, a bank statement from an old savings account she'd opened at 18, back when she slung coffee and tutored kids to save for college. She'd scraped together $25,000 by graduation, a nest egg for her first apartment, a symbol of her grit. Now, the balance glared back, $0. Her breath hitched as she scrolled the history. Small withdrawals over a decade, totaling exactly $25,000, siphoned to an account labeled Harper Family Fund. Authorized by David Harper, co-signer from when she was a minor. Her vision blurred, tears mixing with fury. That money was her 3M shifts, her skipped lunches, her dreams of stability, stolen while Sophie cruised in that Jeep Riley paid for. She dialed David, her voice shaking but steel-edged. "Dad, how could you take my savings, my money?" His reply was ice-cold, unrepentant. "It was for the family, Riley. You don't get it. Sophie needed a safety net. You were always fine on your own." The line went dead, his words a gunshot in her chest. Fine on her own? She'd clawed her way up while he stripped her bare. First her past, now her future. Her heart thudded, a warning she ignored as she slammed the laptop shut. She wasn't fine anymore, and they wouldn't be either. Another email popped up, this one from a friend. No sender ID. Attached was a scanned document, a contract dated 3 years ago, with her signature at the bottom. It read, "Riley Harper agrees to transfer personal assets to the Harper Family Fund for the protection and stability of the family estate." Her stomach dropped like a stone in the lake. She'd never signed this, never even seen it. But the signature, it was hers. Down to the sharp loop on the R, forgery. A trap. If David pushed this in court, she'd be liable for the trust fund's origins. $500,000 she couldn't explain. Fraud charges, prison. Her career, gone. Her freedom, gone. Her pulse spiked, a sharp pain lancing through her chest. She gripped the table, fighting to breathe, the room spinning. Her phone buzzed. "Sophie!" A text from 2 years back resurfaced in her mind as she stared at the screen. "Dad says, you're the key to fixing this. Don't let us down." Back then it felt like a plea. Now, a setup. She opened the new message. "Riley, Dad's freaking out about Bear Lake taxes." "You're not bailing, right?" "Bailing?" She laughed, a bitter rasp. She'd carried them all, and now Sophie was in on it. Or was she? Doubt gnawed at her. She typed back, "Ask Dad where my $25,000 went." No reply. Silence from the golden child. Owen's call cut through the haze. "Riley, I've got something. That $25,000 from your savings, it's in Sophie's trust fund, every cent. And it's not $350,000 anymore. David's been investing it, quietly. It's $500,000 now, with returns tied to your money. You've got a case here. Fraud, theft, forgery if that contract's fake." Riley's jaw clenched. "It's fake, Owen. Get it notarized. I'm not letting this go." He paused. "This could get ugly, Riley. Lawsuits? Cops? You sure?" She glanced at the cassette, Nora's Polaroid beside it. "I'm sure." She hung up, her mind racing. David wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. That contract meant he'd planned this for years, a safety net to bury her if the trust fund surfaced. And Sophie? Either she knew, or she was a pawn. Riley's chest tightened again, her heart skipping beats. She reached for her pills, swallowing hard, but the ache lingered. She'd hidden her condition to be their rock. Now it was crumbling under their lies. She pulled up an old photo on her phone. Her and Sophie, 10 and 8, fishing with Nora at Bear Lake. Sophie's grin was wide, Riley's protective arm around her. "Was that ever real?" she whispered, tears spilling over. The doorbell jolted her. A courier dropped off a letter. "First Utah Bank, notice of foreclosure, Bear Lake property, taxes and penalties, $120,000. Due in 72 hours or the property will be seized." Her hands shook. David hadn't paid, not with Sophie's $500,000 sitting pretty. He was betting she'd cave, like always. Her phone lit up. David again. "Riley, you see the notice? Pay it or we lose everything. Don't destroy Nora's memory over some grudge." Nora's memory? He'd trashed it first. She tossed the phone aside, resolve hardening. She wasn't their ATM anymore. She was their reckoning. Last time, Riley Harper uncovered a $25,000 theft from her savings, a forged contract to frame her, and a $500,000 trust fund her father David built for her sister Sophie. all while her heart teetered on the edge. The Bear Lake house is 72 hours from foreclosure, and David's doubling down. Tonight, it all explodes. Secret spill, a life hangs in the balance, and a sister steps up. What would you do if your family's lies could kill someone you love? Stay with us. This is the breaking point. Riley Harper gripped the foreclosure notice, the $120,000 deadline ticking like a bomb in her Salt Lake City apartment. 72 hours to save Bear Lake, or let it fall. David's voicemail echoed in her head. Pay it, or we lose everything. Don't destroy Nora's memory. He'd trashed it with every lie, every dollar he'd stolen, $25,000 from her savings, $175,000 she'd bled into this family, all funneled into Sophie's trust fund. And that forged contract, it was his ace, a legal noose to choke her if she fought back. Her chest ached, her disorder flaring under the strain, but she shoved the pills aside. She needed clarity, not numbness. Her phone buzzed. Ethan Cole, her cousin. Emergency family meeting at Bear Lake tomorrow. David's rallying everyone. Says you're abandoning us. Watch out, Riley. She clenched her jaw. A trap! David wasn't just guilting her, he was weaponizing the family. Then a text from Mia Sullivan, her aunt. David says you're sitting on millions while he's losing it all. Is that true? Millions? Riley's portfolio barely hit $300,000 after taxes, most of it gone to them. David was spinning lies, turning kin into his army. Before she could reply, a courier pounded on her door, a legal summons. David was suing her, $50,000 for financial and emotional distress, claiming her $175,000 in payments were voluntary gifts. A handwritten note stapled to it. You've gone too far, Riley. I'll take this to the papers. Salt Lake won't forget a traitor. Her hands shook. He'd ruin her career, her name, everything. Then a call from Lucas Grant, a sleazy local reporter. Riley got a tip from your dad. Traitor ditches dying family. I've got audio of him admitting he took your cash, but it'll cost you $50,000 to hear it. She froze. Proof, but at a price. Her heart thudded, a sharp stab forcing her to sit. She hung up, the room spinning, Nora's Polaroid blurring and her health fraying. She packed the cassette. Owen's notarized docs, $25,000 theft, $500,000 trust fund, and drove to Bear Lake, resolve burning through the pain. The cabin buzzed with tension as she stepped in, briefcase in hand. David stood by the fireplace, mid-rant. Riley's abandoning us when we need her most, letting Bear Lake go over a grudge? Sophie sat on the plaid sofa, arms crossed, blonde hair tight in a bun. Grace fidgeted beside her, pale and trembling. Nate Sullivan, Mia, and Ethan lined the room, confusion, anger, doubt in their eyes. Riley slammed her briefcase down, cutting David off. Grudge? Her voice trembled but held. Let's talk numbers. She tossed out bank statements. $45,000 in taxes, $1,800 for Sophie's Jeep, $120,000 for the roof, $9,000 for mom's surgery, $175,000 total, and $25,000 stolen from my savings, straight into Sophie's $500,000 trust fund. Gasps ripped through the room. Nate's jaw dropped. Mia clutched her purse. Sophie's face paled, her mouth working silently. David's fists clenched, his voice booming. Lies! Private matters. You've got no right. Riley threw a statement at his feet. Your signature, Dad. Every withdrawal. You told me we were broke while you built Sophie a fortune on my dime. Grace's hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling. David, is this true? Did you take her money? He ignored her, advancing on Riley. You've got millions stashed. You're jealous of Sophie. Riley laughed, sharp and raw. $300,000, Dad. Most of it gone to you. You're the thief. Nate cut in, furious. What kind of father steals from his kid and frames her? Mia nodded, doubt shifting. Sophie shrank, whispering, Riley, is this real? Riley met her eyes. Every penny, Soph. I paid for your life while Dad told me I didn't need help." Then she hit play on the cassette. David's voice filled the room. "Riley's the fall guy. She's got the skills to fake it." Silence crashed down, broken by Grace's gasp. She clutched her chest, her frail frame crumpling. "Mom!" Riley lunged, catching her as she fell, her pulse erratic under Riley's fingers. "Oh God, no. Someone call 911. I don't want to have to wake up once." Grace's eyes fluttered, her breath a rasp. "Riley, I saw the tape in Nora's box." "I was scared to tell. Forgive me." Her words shattered Riley, tears streaming as she cradled her mother. Sophie sobbed, fumbling for her phone, while Ethan dialed emergency. David stood frozen, face a mask of panic. "I didn't mean," he stammered, but Riley's glare silenced him. "If she dies, it's on you. Your lies, your greed." Sirens wailed in the distance as paramedics burst in, prying Grace from Riley's arms. "Possible heart failure. Critical," one barked, strapping an oxygen mask over Grace's ashen face. Riley clung to her hand until they wheeled her out, knees buckling as the ambulance roared away. Sophie knelt beside her, tears streaking her makeup. "I didn't know it was this bad, I swear." Riley didn't look up, her voice hollow. "You didn't want to." Ethan checked his phone, grim. "Bank's taking the house. Taxes unpaid. It's gone." Riley closed her eyes, Bear Lake slipping away, Grace's life on a thread. All because David wouldn't touch Sophie's fund. Then Sophie stood, voice shaking. "I'm pulling $100,000 from the trust and selling the Jeep. It's $20,000 more. Mom's getting that surgery." She glared at David. "If she dies, I'll never forgive you." Last time, Riley Harper faced her family head-on at Bear Lake, exposing David's lies and $500,000 trust fund. Only for Grace to collapse into a coma, the house to slip away, and Sophie to finally step up with $120,000 for her mom's surgery. The wreckage is real, but is there hope in the ashes? Tonight, we're closing this saga with tears, redemption, and a new dawn. What would you do if you lost it all, but found something worth fighting for? Let's wrap this up. Riley Harper sat in the sterile waiting room of Salt Lake Regional Medical Center, a cold styrofoam coffee cup trembling in her hands. The clock ticked past midnight, each second an eternity since Grace had been wheeled away, her frail body hooked to machines after a heart failure that mirrored Riley's own hidden struggle. Bear Lake was gone, foreclosed that afternoon, 72 hours after David's refusal to tap Sophie's trust fund. Riley's chest ached, not just from her disorder, but from the weight of it all. $175,000 she'd given, $25,000 stolen, a forged contract to frame her, and now her mother's life teetering on the edge. She'd exposed the truth, but at what cost? Her phone buzzed. "Ethan, Grace is stable for now. They're prepping surgery. You okay?" She typed back, "I'm here. Thanks." Stable. The word felt fragile, like the last thread tying her to the family she'd once bled for. The door creaked open and Sophie stepped in, blonde hair tangled, eyes swollen red. Riley tensed, bracing for a fight. Sophie had wielded guilt like a blade, had lived off Riley's sacrifices, but now she looked broken, clutching a velvet box. "Riley, can we talk?" Riley nodded, too drained to argue. Sophie sank beside her, staring at the floor. "I went to the bank after they took Mom, pulled $100,000 from the trust fund, sold the Jeep for $20,000. It's covering the surgery. Dad flipped out, but I don't care. She's getting it tomorrow." Riley's breath caught. $120,000, real action, not words. Sophie's voice cracked. "I knew about the trust since I was 18. Dad said it was my safety net, because I wasn't smart like you. I didn't ask where it came from. I didn't want to. I was selfish, Riley, and I hate myself for it." Tears spilled as she opened the box, revealing Nora's ring. gold with a tiny emerald worn smooth by love. Found this in Dad's safe. He was going to sell it. I stopped him. It's yours. You deserve it. Riley stared at the ring, memories flooding back. Nora's warm hands guiding her fishing pole, her whisper, "You're tougher than they know." She slipped it on, the weight grounding her as tears welled. "Thank you," she whispered, voice breaking. Sophie nodded, sobbing. "I've been a leech you broke your back, and I took. I'm fixing this, starting now." For the first time, Riley saw her sister, not a rival, but a girl waking from the same nightmare. Doubt lingered. Could years of taking be undone? But Sophie's raw guilt softened the edge. The ICU door swung open. "She's awake! Keep it short," a nurse said. Riley and Sophie stepped into the dim room, Grace lying frail under an oxygen mask, her eyes fluttering open. "Riley? Sophie?" she rasped, reaching out. Riley took her hand, tears falling. "Mom, I'm here." Grace's grip tightened. "I saw Nora's tape months ago. I was scared of him. Should have stopped it. So sorry, honey." The confession pierced Riley, a balm and a wound. Grace had known, had stayed silent, but her regret was real. "It's okay, Mom. Just rest," Riley said, forehead pressed to hers, sobbing quietly. Through the glass, Riley glimpsed David in the hall, shoulders slumped, face haggard. He had texted earlier, "You killed this family." Now he met her gaze, then looked away, shame flickering. Sophie squeezed Grace's other hand. "We're paying for you, Mom, not him." Grace's eyes softened. "I'm proud of you both. I never was strong like you." The words sank deep, Nora's ring warm on Riley's finger, a promise she'd survived. Hours later, Grace's surgery succeeded, but the damage was done. She'd never walk again. In her room, she held their hands, a fragile trio against the storm. David vanished. Home, maybe, or hiding. Then a voicemail from Lucas Grant. "Riley? You didn't pay, but I'm no monster. Cops have the tape." "David's done." She played it. David's voice confessing the theft, the frame-up. Police were circling him now. Fraud, forgery, jail looming. A letter arrived later, his scrawl shaky. "I thought I was protecting Sophie. I was wrong, Riley. Regret? Too late." Riley's phone pinged, her advisor Jim Carter. "Heard about the house. Let's rebuild your future. $300,000 a start." She smiled faintly, a spark igniting. Days later, she sat in her apartment, Nora's ring glinting as she filmed a video. "I almost lost everything. My family, my health, my home. But I found myself. This is Nora's legacy. A fund for people betrayed by their own. We rise from the ashes." She'd poured her $300,000 into it, a lifeline for others like her. Her heart still raced some nights, but the pills held it steady. For now. She drove west that evening, Salt Lake fading in the rear view, mountains shrinking behind her. The radio hummed a soft tune about new beginnings. Nora's ring, a quiet promise. "I'll build it again, Grandma, for me," she whispered. The road stretched dark but open, unburdened at last. The Harpers were ashes, but Riley was the flame. "So, what's your verdict? Does David deserve a second chance or jail? Can Grace and Sophie earn forgiveness, or is it too little too late?" Drop your thoughts. This story's over, but the debate's just starting. Hit subscribe. More real-life dramas are coming your way.